Welcome to the show here. I'm grateful that you finally found a way to pop in.
We're sitting atop a hotel in downtown St. Petersburg, and it's this restaurant called Mansarda. I'll just give you a quick scan.
That's awesome. Hey, I wonder if you could just kind of tell everybody real quickly, what are you doing there in Russia, first of all? What's the event?
I was invited to attend the St. Petersburg International Economic Forum. It has about 20,000 people in attendance from over 140 countries. I was asked to make a presentation on sort of the new world economic and political order that's unfolding before us. So I'm actually, the group I'm with the grandson of Nelson Mandela, and I'm also with one of the largest owners of a media company in China. It's quite a mixed group.
Wow, that's a pretty big group, and I think just the fact that that's happening with so many different countries, we could probably spend a whole show talking about the shifting economic order in the world, and kind of how some of our actions are, helping push that in the bad direction from our interest here. But listen, I want to talk about what's really hot right now, and that is some of these claims in the last 2 days, especially by Vladimir Putin about, as some of our viewers have been talking about here, that Putin seems to be fed up with what's been going on in the United States and what we've been doing. I want to kind of get a running start into this. I'm going to show you something that Putin said actually in February of this year to kind of show the progression of where his mind has been. Watch this one first.
They're talking about the possibility of sending NATO military contingents to Ukraine. But we remember the fate of those who once sent their contingents to our country. But now, the consequences for possible interventionists will be much more tragic. We also have weapons. They know about this. As I just said, we also have a weapon that can hit targets on their territory. And they should understand that what they're doing now, trying to scare the whole world, it does risk a conflict with nuclear weapons, which means the destruction of civilization.
Now, I don't know if Larry, were you able to hear that?
Yeah.
Okay, perfect. So that's what he said back in February, and elsewhere in that same conversation, he ended it by saying, "Don't these people understand that? Don't they understand what they're playing with?" And it almost seems like that some in the West don't, or that they think that he'll never do that. But as we see in this one, first of all, let's hit the one up from yesterday, I think on the 5th of June, to where he finally says, to quote one of our viewers here, that he was fed up with our BS, so to speak, is that he says, okay, you've been using your weapons to give to Ukraine to fire on my territory. Guess what? We can play that. Two can play that game. Here's what he said.
Мы думаем на тему о том, что если кто-то считает возможным поставлять такое оружие в зону боевых действий для нанесения ударов по нашей территории и создания проблем для нас, то почему у нас нет права поставлять наше оружие такого же класса в те регионы мира, где будут наноситься удары по чувствительным объектам тех стран, которые делают это в отношении России?
So let's take a look at that first, Larry. Before you came on, we showed President Biden earlier today in Normandy Beach saying, yeah, look, I didn't give him permission to shoot like into the Kremlin or into Moscow, just a little bit into Russian territory. It's no big deal. Is it a big deal?
Huge deal. And in fact, if you paid attention to not only what Putin said, but what Sergei Lavrov said 2 days ago, as well as the deputy foreign minister, Sergei Rybkov, spelled Rybkov. I have met with Mr. Rybkov. He is a very sober, understated person. And when he said what he did the other day about Russia being fed up, these boys ain't playing. They're not talking like Washington, D.C. politicians saying one thing meaning another. They mean exactly what they're saying. So here's what I think we're going to see. I think the Russians will now start supplying the groups linked to the anti-ISIS groups that are operating in Syria and Iraq. They will supply them with weapons that can hit U.S. military bases. They will supply the Houthis with weapons that can hit U.S. ships. They're not playing. They say, you're going to launch those into our country? Fine, you're going to pay a price. And they're going to do it.
That's a pretty bold statement there, and a pretty sobering possibility, because I mean you see when any American troops have been killed in the Middle East and these bases that we should have gotten rid of long ago. I'll just throw that in there. But now then they become a point of vulnerability, which I've been preaching about since 2019, and now that it's at a higher level. If that happened, here's the question I got for you. Looking at, from the U.S. side here, we always respond if any of our troops are killed here. What would we do in response to American troops getting killed because something was provided by the Russians?
A lot we could do, at least to Russia, without risking destroying ourselves. We could try to go after these groups that are launching the missiles, but I mean, let's be candid. Operation Prosperity Guardian's been underway now for going on 7 months. We haven't been able to stop the Houthis. I mean, for God's sake, people, if you can't stop the Houthis, you think you're going to stop Iran, or you're going to stop Russia or China? I mean, we need to wake up and look in the mirror, because this has now got to the point of our country has become the ultimate narcissist. The essence of a narcissist is someone who believes they're more better than they really are, that they're much more talented than they really are. And also, think about this in the context. We've had Donald Trump promise that he's going to use U.S. military forces going cross-border into Mexico after the drug cartels. And I can understand why, because the drug cartels are killing over 100,000 Americans a year. That's that's twice as many as we lost in Vietnam over 15 years, and that's just 1 year. Well, what happens then if Russia started supplying the Mexican drug cartels with missiles to hit inside the United States? We would take that as an act of war. Well, by God, that's exactly what we're doing to Russia in Ukraine, because Russia had as much reason to go across border into Ukraine to stop the killing of Russians as Donald Trump is talking about going into Mexico to go after cartels. But see, that's our problem. We can sure dish it out, but by God, we can't take it.
So what's going to happen, Larry, if let's just use that example there. Let's say that one of these anti-American violent groups in Syria gets these weapons, makes good, kills American troops. And let's say then that Biden then says, okay, two can play at that game. We're going to take out Russian assets in Syria because there's plenty of them there. What happens then?
The Russians will retaliate, and the United States will be at war with Russia, and we're not ready to go to war with Russia. Like I said, we can't even stop the Houthis. So on what planet do these people live that, we allow the Houthis to continue to attack ships in the Red Sea? We can't stop that, but by God, we're going to shut down the Russians. The Russians have the most combat-tested military in the world. There is no other military that is combat-tested and ready as they are on all fronts. Infantry, air power, and when you put those two combined, the United States we've been fighting the third-rate team. We've been fighting the guys that don't have fixed-wing aircraft. They don't have close air support with a rotary wing aircraft. They don't have artillery that can fire 30, 40 miles at us. They don't, on and on and on. We've been used to fighting guys in sandals with AK-47s and some mortars. And we call that combat. We have no idea what combat is. And what Putin and the rest, when the foreign ministry is talking this way, it'd be one thing if it was the Ministry of Defense. But when the foreign ministry is talking that way, it's time for American politicians to wake up and recognize we've been poking the bear is awake, and you do not want to mess with a hungry bear.
Now, why do you distinguish between the Ministry of Defense and the Ministry of Foreign Affairs? For the American audience who may not understand any distinction, why is that noteworthy?
Because the Ministry of Foreign Affairs they're about diplomacy. They're about talking. They're about trying to calm things down. They're not out poking people in the chest and saying, hey, calling them other names and questioning, their parental heritage. These are people that are skilled diplomats. They're about making friends, not about creating enemies. And the fact that they've gotten to the point that they don't feel like they can have any conversations anymore with anyone in Washington is alarming. And I've heard that directly from one of the senior foreign ministry types. They go, who do we talk to? We're ready to talk. Who do we talk to? Nobody's answering the phone at the Biden White House. He's too busy trying to figure out what flavor ice cream he wants before he goes to bed.
Yeah. So we actually had Doug McGregor on yesterday talking about some of the similar things that our forces are trained in counterinsurgency warfare. And I mean, most of their entire careers of the people who are in right now. And so we just have no idea what coming under that kind of firepower. I've seen like the tossed flamethrower systems have just had devastating consequences, the glide bombs, all those things on the front line. And I'm talking about somebody who fought in an armored warfare early on. And even I only had a fraction, just a small taste of what the incoming fire that we would face if we go in today. So I totally agree about this, about how difficult that process would be. But let's look at the next level. So you just painted a pretty good picture to why on the tactical, on the battlefield level, we would not be in a good place if we get into a fight with Russia. But unfortunately, this could all too easily escalate. And today, Vladimir Putin, after yesterday talking about the tactical situation, now he escalated it up to the strategic when he said this.
Американцы — единственная страна, Соединенные Штаты, которая использовала ядерное оружие во Второй мировой войне. Хиросима, Нагасаки — 20 килотонн. Наше тактическое ядерное оружие — 70-75 килотонн. Это такое ядерное тактическое оружие. Давайте не доводить не только до использования, а даже до угрозы использования. На Западе считают, что Россия никогда этого не использует. У нас же есть ядерная доктрина. Посмотрите, что написано. Если чьи-то действия будут угрожать нашему суверенитету и территориальной целостности, мы считаем для себя возможным использовать все имеющиеся в нашем распоряжении средства. Нельзя относиться к этому легко, поверхностно. Нужно относиться профессионально.
Now that kind of ekes back to what you were saying a second ago about professionally, like on their diplomatic side here. But this to me is very alarming. And then the reason why I showed that one from February to now, because he talked about in February that if this goes nuclear, you're talking about potentially the end of civilization. Because once one of those thresholds is crossed, and then you have the tit for tat, no one knows where it's going to stop. But now then you see here on June the 6th, he's talking a lot more directly about this is our doctrine, this is our capability, we're willing to use it. So the question I have to you is, how serious is he? How close is he? And is there any difference between now and February?
Big difference between now and then. To use the Missouri farmer expression, he's dead ass serious. He's not playing. This is not a bluff. He is saying exactly what he means. Look, for example, if we deploy F-16s into Ukraine, the F-16 is capable of carrying a nuclear weapon. That's what they're configured for. How does Russia know that F-16 sitting on the tarmac is not loaded up with a nuclear weapon in light of what the United States has been saying? They have to assume, just like we were during the Cuban Missile Crisis, if they're putting missiles in Cuba that can reach the continental United States, we don't have the luxury of assuming, oh, they're just conventional warheads, so they're not going to do a lot of damage. Your doctrine dictates that you assume that they're carrying nuclear weapons, and you got to stop them. And that's exactly how the Russians are doing it. On top of that, we have already deployed systems in Poland and in Romania that are capable of firing nuclear weapons. So far to this point, the Russians have not made that a red line, but they're now making that a red line. And U.S. politicians better wake up and pay attention, or else we're going to be in big trouble. And this literally could lead to the destruction of U.S. military bases in the United States with nuclear weapons.
What do you think as best you can, I'm sure no one's giving you any inside information here, but based on your analysis and your knowledge, what would trigger Putin actually using a tactical nuclear weapon? He mentioned in there about his territorial sovereignty. You mentioned about the possibility of just seeing a nuclear capable aircraft in the sky. What would actually trigger him to use it, do you think?
I think if we used a Taurus missile, a German Taurus missile, or an ATACMS that hit one of the strategic radars that Russia has deployed, that would probably elicit a Soviet response with a tactical move. If it's drones, they're irritated by it, and but they're going to step it up conventionally. They view nuclear as a last resort. But the thing the United States needs to understand is Russia has at least prepared. Now, when I say they prepared, they don't go into it with the illusion that, oh yeah, we can win this without losses. They recognize there would be terrific losses. But this is a country that lost 27 million people during World War II and survived. The United States lost a grand total of 430,000 to 470. We still don't have good numbers. That's total in Pacific and European theaters. To put it in sort of numbers people can understand, 16 out of every 100 Russians died during World War II. In the United States, only 20% of one person died out of 100. So the Russians understand the risk that comes with that loss. That's one of the things Americans don't. We've been playing war for the last 60 years. Yeah, we lost 58,000 in Vietnam. And if it was one of your family members, that's a loss that you can't put a price on. But for the rest of Americans, it's no big deal. Nobody was deprived of being able to fill their car up with gas or go to a movie or go out to eat. They didn't have to make any sacrifice. Those sacrifices are paid by these other people. And so when we live in that kind of fantasy world where we've been able to launch wars in Iraq and in Syria and in Afghanistan, and we pay really no price at all, it's easy to go to war and to make these kinds of threats without understanding the consequences.
Larry, I wonder if you can kind of explain what the Russian doctrine of escalate to de-escalate means in general terms and how that might look like if it is. Because obviously Russia, if they use nuclear weapons, it's not going to be because they want to get into a nuclear exchange. They want to prevent that. What would that look like in reality?
They'll take out strategic targets that the United States could potentially hit back with. And at the same time, they'd be prepared with their defense systems that are quite capable of shooting down intercontinental ballistic missiles. Not 100%, but what they're going to demonstrate, they will basically castrate the United States. We will be unable to respond, and that is where the United States has never been in that position in our history, but we will be confronted with that if this escalation continues, and it's senseless. There's no need for it, but we continue to portray Russia as some totalitarian dictatorship that is intent on conquering the world. That's just a lie. It's nonsense. All Americans need to do is come visit. You'd be surprised at the number of Americans I've run into that have moved from the United States to Russia. And why? Because they're finding more freedom here, believe it or not. That's what they're telling me.
Now, I wonder if you can, because we're running a little bit low on time here. I wonder if you can tell me what is the mood there among the Russians? Because if you're talking about nuclear weapons, or talking about using tactical weapons, elsewhere in the world and kind of a tit for tat, that's probably one thing. But even the talk of possibility of using nuclear weapons, everybody understands one could come back. How do the people there view the threat here, and do they worry about what Putin's saying?
I have not heard anybody say, "Oh boy, Putin's lost." No, they're just the opposite. They see Putin having been very, very patient. So far, the war really hasn't touched the Russians. I've been in Moscow and St. Petersburg in the last 6 months, and there's not a lot of talk about the war. You don't see a lot of signs up. I've seen a couple of signs offering people a contract to come, go to work with the Russian military. But they're largely untouched by the war right now. But there is growing concern that if the West keeps escalating this, they feel obligated. What has happened is it's rallied the population around Putin in a way. He's got more support now than he did 2 years ago.
Wow, that's really saying something here. In the last bit of time we have here, I wonder if you can give us, because you're connected kind of to both sides here, and you've got lots of assets in the U.S. intelligence community and elsewhere in Washington. What is your understanding of how all this is striking the American leadership? Are they aware of how risky what they're doing is? And do you see any evidence that they're going to even take an appetite suppressant and just back off even just a little bit?
None whatsoever. America has got a delusional view. They look at Putin's restraint over the last 2 years as weakness. Not that Putin was exercising restraint and trying to be the adult in the room. They view it as he's weak, he's not able to do it, he's just making idle threats. I tell you what, when you make those kinds of assumptions playing poker about your opponent, you're going to walk out of there naked and without any money. And that's what I fear the United States is setting itself up for. Because, you know, Danny, while we're talking about this with Russia, we've got members of Congress talking about going to war with China, too, at the same time. And I keep coming back to it, but pay attention to the Houthis. If we can't stop the Houthis, in what magical world are we living when we think that we can fight a two-front war against Russia and China? We can't even supply Ukraine with 155 millimeter shells.
Right. And we've given so many of ours away. If we ever had to need them, we would be in a world of hurt. I do have a few more minutes here. There's been a lot of talk in NATO over the last about a week to 10 days from numerous heads of state or senior officials in various NATO countries saying, hey, Russia's coming after us. So even after this is done, we've got one as few as 2, some say maybe as many as 10 years that Russia's coming for us, so we better get ready for a war. When you hear that kind of talk, what do you think?
It's crazy talk. We got a 30-year record of Russia. They've only sent, until Ukraine, they only sent troops into one other country. That was in Georgia after Georgia attacked them. You know, unlike the United States, Russia hasn't gone to Iraq twice. Russia hasn't gone to Afghanistan. Russia hasn't gone to Syria. Russia hasn't gone to Somalia. I mean, let's run down the list of the only country in the world that is consistently invading other nations and launching military strikes. Look in the mirror, America. It's us, not them.
So is there a risk that it could be what's the term they use, mutually reinforcing bad assumption, where self-fulfilling prophecy, is what I was looking for, that we think that a war's coming, so everybody gets ready, and then Russia sees, okay, all these countries on our borders are getting ready, so we're going to actually ramp up too, and then you could actually get the war that allegedly nobody wants.
Yeah, well, I think we're in that kind of spiral. I mean, can you name for me one politician that is in a leadership position that is advocating, let's talk to the Russians, let's calm this down, let's talk to the Chinese, let's calm this down? I don't know of a single one. The ones that are speaking with some sanity, I've seen J.D. Vance and Rand Paul. That's about it. Yeah. Everybody else has got the war fever going on, and as you know, most of the people that are talking that way have never put on a uniform, never fired a gun in anger, and they've never been in a fist fight in a bar. Those kinds of things. If you've actually been in some violent activity, you understand that there's a cost that comes with it. And that's our problem. We think that this is cost-free. We can do it, and we don't have to pay anything for it. We're just putting it on our credit card. And
listen, Larry, I just hope that if Putin genuinely is serious about what he said on the 5th, and he does, provide weapons and they use those somewhere and hit us with a cost, I just pray that we have at least the intelligence and the wisdom to not exacerbate things and make them even worse and possibly escalate this so it's out of anyone's control, because it could go in a really, really bad direction.
Amen, brother. That's my prayer.
but we'll have to see how it works out. Listen, I'm so grateful that you took the time to join with us today. I know that you're really busy out there. We're really grateful for your on-the-ground observations here. Thanks for joining us today.
Hey, thanks for having the patience to wait for me. I appreciate it.